Tēnā koutou katoa, e mihi ana ki nai tahu te iwi mana whanua o Kunei. Ko te pōkoko mataraka o, ko Stuart Brock, tōku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Stuart Brock. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this very special occasion to celebrate the promotion of Stephen Mills to Professor at the University of Otago. These lectures are a wonderful opportunity for us to come together and listen to our new professors talk about their personal journeys, their research platform, and the impact their research has had on others. I'd like to welcome colleagues, students and friends from across the university and beyond. I would like to give a special welcome to Stephen's parents, Lynn and Dave, and sister Karen. Welcome, who are here tonight in person to celebrate Stephen's success with us. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to Stephen's friends and family joining us by live stream this evening, especially his sister Jenny and partner Amanda. It's not easy to become a professor at the University of Otago. In order to be promoted to that level, candidates need to show that they are outstanding in each of three categories: teaching, research and service. Professor Mills has clearly met these criteria. It is an honour and a privilege to congratulate him tonight for that outstanding achievement, and I hope that you'll join me now in doing the same. And I'd just like to emphasise, if I wasn't holding this microphone, I'd be clapping loudly now. Thank you, and you'll have plenty of opportunities to do more of that tonight. Stephen has a deep and enduring relationship with the university and local region. He was born and raised here in Dunedin, enrolled at the university as soon as he could, receiving his Bachelor of Science with honours in Computer Science in 1997, and then his Doctorate of Philosophy 3 years later in the year 2000. After working for a short time in Christchurch as a software developer, he took up a lectureship at the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom. In 2006, he returned to New Zealand and worked in commercial research and development at the Geospatial Research Centre and then Areograph Limited, before returning to what is now the School of Computing as a lecturer in 2011. Stephen's research interests are in computing vision, particularly the reconstruction of three-dimensional scenes and models from multiple images. He's interested in both fundamental and applied research in this field. There are a broad range of applications of his research and of the technology that he uses, but Stephen is most interested in those with cultural and heritage value. Tonight, Stephen will not only discuss his research, he'll also reflect on his academic career to tell us a little bit about his own personal journey and about the impact of his research on the profession, on his teaching, and most importantly, on his students. But before he does that, I'll hand over to Professor Richard Barker, Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the Division of Sciences, to introduce Professor Mills formally and give you a little more detail about his academic background. Thank you.
Professor Brock, tēnā koe. Professor Mills, tēnā koe. Professor Dick, tēnā koe. Friends and colleagues, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Professor Stephen Mills from the School of Computing, to give his inaugural professorial lecture here at the University of Otago. As indicated by Professor Brock, Stephen was promoted to Professor in February this year, and tonight we get to celebrate this significant achievement. In preparing for this, I usually seek some personal insight, and Stephen didn't volunteer much, but he did offer this. In his 200-level software development paper, he uses 2 truths and a lie as an icebreaker in group work. The offering he gives his students is he has worked on a project with Children's Hospital in Sarajevo, Les Mills is his father's cousin, or he doesn't own a car or have a driver's license. So I will leave that as a test for how well you know Stephen. Born and raised mostly in Dunedin, Professor Mills went through the Catholic schools, St Bernadette's, St Teresa's in Invercargill, St Bridget's as primary school, St Edmund's for intermediate year, a year at St Paul's, before it merged with the girls' school to become Kavanagh, now Trinity College. And then, of course, he ended up at this very Protestant university, from which he graduated in 1997, as we've just heard, with a BSc Honours in Computer Science, and then his PhD followed in 2000. Clearly, the apple has not fallen far from the tree. Joining the university in 2011, Stephen was appointed as a lecturer into our Department of Computer Science, and today, just 14 years later, we celebrate his rapid rise through the academic ranks. As we've just heard from Professor Brock, promotion to professor at the University of Otago is far from easy, and one must excel in each of the 3 academic domains of research, teaching and service. Professor Mills is a productive researcher, has published 2 book chapters, 34 journal articles, and more than 100 refereed conference proceedings, which are the main form of outlet in his field. Since 2020, Stephen has received external grant funding totalling $14.5 million, including from the Marsden Fund of the Te Aparangi Royal Society, and as a science lead on funding from our Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment. Stephen's work stands out for its collaborative nature in diverse fields such as sports science, geology and surveying, and noteworthy is his work on Mataranga Māori and tikanga carried out in close collaboration with iwi. Professor Mills is also an innovative teacher. In the design and implementation of the paper COSC 202, he introduced a semester-long group project as the primary learning mechanism, which required weekly group meetings with the staff member, which is quite an undertaking when you have 30 such groups. His teaching is also characterised by its disciplinary leadership. He led the curriculum redesign of the computer science program, which was launched in 2021, and then played an instrumental role in designing the new consolidated program following the recent merger of the Departments of Information Science and Computer Science to form our new School of Computing. Stephen was also chair of the Department of Computer Science Teaching and Learning Committee until 2022. He was course advisor and approver for computer science and is currently an external examiner for the University of Canterbury. As is evident, Professor Mills has a strong service ethic, and service is the final domain in which our professors must excel in order to be promoted. For his department, Stephen has overseen the revitalisation of the Otago Computing Students Society, has served as a long-standing kaiwhena Māori for the department and now his school since 2016, and has been responsible for coordinating department contributions to the Science Expo. For the university, what stands out from a number of service roles for me is his membership of the Sciences Academic Board Standing Committee from 2021 to 2023, and those in the know realise that that's a significant piece of work with the heavy lifting of the academic development gets done in the division. He was a member of the Web Advisory Committee, including as a stint as chair, and he was an elected member of the Sciences Focus Group, which had input into the selection of the Vice-Chancellor in 2021. And significantly, Stephen was the last head of the Department of Computer Science before it merged into our School of Computing. In fact, it makes him one of our shortest serving HODs on record, but that was for noble reasons, not competence. Stephen's service to the professional community is significant, and this includes his work supporting conferences as chair and scientific program co-chair for the Image and Vision Computing New Zealand series of conferences, as well as serving on program committees for a significant number of international conferences. He has served as an external grant assessor for the Marsden Fund and for the Science for Technology Innovation National Sciences Challenge, as well as acting as external examiner for PhD and master's thesis in a number of national and international universities. I'll finish by highlighting Stephen's commitment to a particular community service passion, and that is in connection with his long-standing collaborations with iwi. These include creating a virtual wharanui in the Atia project with the Te Runanga o Awarua, interactive exhibits to promote understanding and revitalisation of Moriori culture, and the Haurongo exhibition with the Hokotehi Moriori Trust, and developing 3D shape analysis techniques to understand traditional Māori tool manufacture in collaboration with archaeologists and Te Hura Otago Museum. Mindful of the fact that you are to hear from Stephen tonight and not me, I will finish and now invite you to please join me in welcoming Professor Stephen Mills.
Thank you. Professor Brock, tēnā koe. Professor Barker, tēnā koe. Professor Dick, tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou e hoa mā. Koutou iwi a hau. Ko wari ana me, ko tere ana te whakapaparanga mai. Nō te poti o. Ko aharangi o I te kura rauahiko I o tākou whakai waka. Ko Steve Mills toku ingoa. Nō rara, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, me rongo, and welcome to my inaugural professorial lecture, A Vision for Computing. Professor Brock and Professor Barker have covered most of it already, but I've got the stage, so I'll go into a bit more detail. So what is in store for you tonight? Let's see what's on the cards. I'll perform a reading. The past, the wheel of fortune, change, cycles, fate, decisive moments, luck, fortune, unexpected events. There are people who tell you that they got where they are through hard work and are masters of their own destiny. These people are delusional. It does take hard work to succeed. You need to make the most of the opportunities that are given to you. But the journey is never entirely yours to choose. I'll talk about the journey that has led me here tonight to be speaking to you. There will be baby photos. The present, the magician, willpower, desire, creation, manifestation. The academic role is unusual in that we have a lot of autonomy to research what we please. And computers allow us to create things out of nothing but thin air and mathematics. We dwell in ivory towers and perform miracles with our arcane knowledge. I'll endeavour to give you some idea about the technical work I do and how it is applied. The future, justice, cause and effect, clarity, truth. Having the freedom to do what I choose means I have the responsibility to choose what I do. I need to consider why I make those choices. Does what I do make things better? How do we decide to use the opportunities that are given to us? So in summary, I'm going to talk about who I am and how I got here, what I do, mostly in my professional life, and importantly, why we do the things that we do. Most of you here tonight will know some of what I'm going to talk about. Some of you will know most of what I'm going to talk about. But as is traditional, I won't be confining my comments to my life at university and at work, so it's entirely possible that none of you will know all of what I'm going to say. And that's as it should be. So first up, the wheel of fortune. Who am I and how did I get here? This lecture is an opportunity to reflect on how far I've come in my career. And it is, in many ways, surprising how far I have come in my career. To get started, let's take a closer look. Maybe a little bit closer. I have come 850 metres by roads from Queen Mary Maternity Hospital, now Hayward College, to my office in the Owhaiu building. I'm sure you'll agree that's a surprisingly short distance. I did, of course, take the long way round. The journey has been a little longer than that, and the path has never been direct or entirely planned. So let's take a broader view. I was born here in Otipoti, Dunedin, and mostly grew up here with a couple of years in Invercargill. I studied at the University of Otago, and having completed my degrees, I moved to Christchurch and worked as a web developer at eStar Online. Unlike a lot of web developer companies that were operating around the turn of the millennium, they're still going strong. About a year or so into that, I did the OE thing and I moved to the University of Nottingham, taking up my first academic post. 5 years later, my visa was coming to an end, and I took the opportunity to return to New Zealand with the formation of the Geospatial Research Centre in Christchurch, a collaboration between the Universities of Canterbury and Nottingham. With that job, I moved to Wellington and then worked remotely for Areograph, a Dunedin-based company, as you do. Finally, in 2011, I returned to Dunedin to take up a lectureship in computer science at the University of Otago, and I've been here ever since. So that's another version of how I got here, a version where I chose my path and succeeded based on some combination of hard work and raw talent. In short, it's a convenient fiction and only bears coincidental resemblance to what really happened. The truth is that I've had a fortunate life. I was fortunate to be born here in a time and a place where there were strong social structures, healthcare, education. I have loving and supportive parents, a stable home life, and relative peace. This is not something that everyone has. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, mostly in Dunedin, but with a couple of years in Invercargill. At school, I was good at the academic things and averse to PE. There were early signs of where I was headed. I enjoyed reading, games, and puzzles. In short, I was a quiet, geeky child. That goes one of two ways. Having older and younger sisters, I was also somewhat of a neutral agent. On car trips to Wanaka for holidays, I sat in the middle of the back seat on a kind of diplomatic mission. My sisters and I have taken quite different paths. Karen went directly from school to work, and Jenny went to art school. I ended up here. My parents supported us in our different choices, and I think that speaks very highly of them, not to choose our path for us, but to support us in what we wanted to do. Thank you, Mum and Dad. My best subject at school was mathematics, which made the physical sciences a natural path. I went to Otago planning to study mathematics, chemistry, and physics. I needed an extra paper in order to be eligible for honours, so I took a computing paper on advice of a friend. I decided I liked the programming more than the other stuff, and so I ended up doing my degree in computer science with what would now be considered a minor in mathematics, despite having not completed the other first-year computing paper. So technically, I've not made requirements for a degree at Otago. For my honours project, I was interested in artificial intelligence, which wasn't quite as hot then as it is now. And so I went to talk with Margaret Jefferies about possible projects. She gave me a few ideas, but said there was a new lecturer in the department, Kevin Novins, who was looking for students who had a strong maths background in order to do this thing called computer vision. So I went to chat with Kevin. He had some interesting projects. I took a chance on that and graduated with my honours degree in 1997 and my PhD in 2000, both under Kevin's supervision. University is not, of course, just about the academic side of things. It's a place to meet new people, try out new things, and for many people it's a time when relationships are formed. No matter what kind of weirdo you are, there's a whole lot of other weirdos just like you at university. Thank you, weirdos. You know who you are. It's all of you. My childhood interest of reading and puzzles and games combined in my hobby of role-playing games and board games. The core of my role-playing group formed at university, and we still meet every Thursday to play games and talk about what's going in our lives. We recently went out to celebrate 25 years of making up stories and sharing our time together. More importantly, that's a group of friends that I have decades of history with, who meet every week and we talk about what's going on. We have an activity to share that allows us to escape from the world, but sometimes we escape from the activity and just deal with what's on our plates. Thanks to the Thursday night crew and to the weekend irregular board gamers. Having completed my PhD, I moved to Christchurch and worked at eStar Online, an e-commerce development house that, as I said, is still going strong. Various life events meant that after a year or two at eStar, I was looking to travel abroad. I thought the UK looked good. I don't speak any other languages than English fluently. And from the UK, you can travel to lots of places in Europe. So it seemed like a good idea. My PhD examiner, or one of them, was Dave Ellerman from the University of Nottingham, so I wrote to him and said, "Would you be a referee? You're the only person I know in the right time zone." He said, "Sure, and we've just closed applications for a lectureship. If you send me your CV, I'll sneak it into the pile." The end result is it was 6 weeks from, I might work in the UK, to landing at Heathrow at 6 a.m, interview started at 10, job offer before 5. I did say yes to the job before they gave me the terms, but if I'd said no, I would have had to pay back the flights. So what can you do? Work at Nottingham was good, and after 5 years I was facing a choice to stay in the UK or come home to New Zealand. There were many factors to consider. My work visa was coming to an end, but one that decided it all for me, and it was time to come home. Returning to relationships we form, the most important one for me, of course, is with my wife, Amanda. Amanda and I did know each other at university, but we only became partners several years later when I went to visit her in Wellington on a trip home for Christmas from Nottingham. It's true that my visa was ending when I came back from the UK, but the reason for coming back was Amanda. We'd ended up in a very long-distance relationship, and Amanda had already used her UK working visa, so the solution was for me to come back to Aotearoa. I didn't tell many people at Nottingham about my plans. These things become self-fulfilling prophecies if you do. But I did tell my close collaborator, Tony Pridmore. One day, he had a conversation in the pub with this guy called David Park, who was looking to set up some sort of geospatial thing in New Zealand, and asked if Tony knew any computer vision people who wanted to move south. Tony said he couldn't say too much, but he should talk to Steve. So I moved back to Christchurch, then Wellington with the Geospatial Research Centre. We did commercial research in GIS and remote sensing. Then the global financial crisis hit, and all of our clients stopped spending money on luxuries, like external contract research. The GRC shuttered, and Amanda and I decided to stay on in Wellington rather than returning to Christchurch with the successor of the GRC, the GRI, the Geospatial Research Institute. I then worked remotely for Areograph, a Dunedin-based company, doing smart stuff with 3D reconstruction. There were 3 developers. I was in Wellington, Phil was in Dunedin, Jerry was in Oxford, and I was the one in the wrong time zone because Phil doesn't do mornings. Working at a startup is exciting in all the ways you can think of, and I was near the end of a window where I had an academic record to apply with, so when a lectureship came up at university, I took it. The end result is that Amanda and I were both fortunate enough to find work in our fields at Otago at around the same time. Amanda is a liaison librarian and curator of music and AV at Hocken Collections. And I started as a lecturer in computer science, now the School of Computing, as has been said, in 2011. So I've come full circle, through good fortune and happenstance, as much as planning or purpose. The short walk from Hayward College is longer than it looks. So that's a bit about how I got here and my life outside of academia. Our next card is the magician. What is it that I do? As was noted in the introduction, to get here I had to do 3 things: research, teaching, and service. So what did I tell the promotions committee that I do? Research. My research area is in computer vision, specifically the reconstruction of 3D scenes from images and applications with cultural, heritage, and social value. This will be the main thing I talk about tonight, and I'll talk about what computer vision is, give a short example of my technical work, don't worry, no equations, and show some of the culture and heritage applications I've been fortunate to contribute to, as well as some others. In teaching, I wish to encourage students to take an active role in their learning by providing a range of opportunities for students to learn and apply the material in a variety of contexts. This evening is a new context for me to reach a new group of students, an opportunity for you to learn more about what I do and who I am. In service, a university is a community of scholarship, so service to that community is intertwined with teaching and research. It's true that a lot of service jobs involve sitting on committees, signing paperwork, that sort of thing. But the purpose is to support the community, and we must remember what a university is. And this is something we'll come back to later on as well. So I've said that I do computer vision. It lets me call my talk a vision for computing. But what does computer vision mean? Essentially, computer vision is the problem of having computers understand and compute information about the world on the basis of images, photographs, videos, that sort of thing. Like a lot of applied computing, this can be viewed as an engineering task. How do we make things to solve problems? In computer vision, we make software, algorithms, programs that take images of the world as input and produce information about the world as output. There's another view of computer vision, is that it's a philosophical problem, a problem of epistemology. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with theory of knowledge. How can we know what we know about the world? In computer vision, the question is, what can we know or reasonably predict about the world on the basis of noisy and incomplete image data? At the end of a PhD, there's normally an oral exam. In my exam, one of the examiners wanted a more formal mathematical style and said that computer vision was an engineering discipline, not a philosophical one. I let it go at the time. There was not a lot to be gained by the argument. I wanted my PhD, please. But I would argue that computer vision is both engineering and philosophy. It is epistemological engineering. There are a lot of different problems in computer vision, such as object detection and tracking, but the part that I'm most interested in is 3D reconstruction. A camera views the 3D world and produces a 2D image. This involves a loss of information. We lose information about the 3D depth and shape of the world. The problem is how to recover this lost information. To give you a flavor of that, I'm going to give you the 5-minute talk without the mathematics of one of my pieces of technical work. There is a longer talk. It's got a lot of formulae. Don't worry, that's for another time. If we've got two images captured from two different locations, we can recover the 3D information by triangulation. Essentially, you cast a ray out from each camera and you see where they intersect. This is what most of us do with stereo vision. We've got two eyes that point forward for a reason. And it's one of the important steps in computer vision is to recover depth from images in this way. A key stage in it is to estimate what's called the relative pose of the two cameras. That's the translation and rotation the camera would have to make to move from where it captures one image to where it captures the second image. The standard way to compute this is to find matching points between two images. There's lots of ways to do this, but what you can see here is a fairly typical result from computing these matches. You can see that there are points that are matched between the two images. Most of them are consistent, but a few of them are mistakes. We've got ways to deal with that as well, as long as there's not too many of them. But given some number of matches between the images, we can compute the motion of the camera, the relative pose. One question that comes up is what's the minimum number of points we need in order to do this? The question is important theoretically, but it also has practical use. I said that we've got ways of dealing with these mistakes. The way that we do that is often through a process called ransack, where we take random sets of points, small sets, compute what the pose would be, and see how many other points agree with that. If we get a set without any mistakes in it, the pose will be good and lots of things will agree. So the smaller the set you can use, the faster that process is going to be. So each pair of points gives us some information about the world. How much information do we need? There's three ways that the camera can translate or shift. It can go forward and backwards, up and down, left and right. So we're going to need 3 bits of information to solve that problem. There's also 3 ways in which the camera can rotate. If you're in an aeroplane, this is yaw, pitch, and roll. You hope the pilot doesn't do too much of any of them. So it looks like we need 6 pieces of information here, 6 matching points. But it turns out that we can't determine everything about the camera motion. Cameras can't see how big the world is. That's why miniature photography works. So we lose a degree of freedom, one of these ways in which we can change, because we can't tell how far the camera has moved. We can't determine the scale of the world, so we're down to 5 points that we need in order to solve this. So we need 5 points for relative pose, and there's an algorithm called the 5-point algorithm for solving this. We get really imaginative with naming in this area. You might be able to guess some other algorithms as we go. But this algorithm is rather complicated and hard to solve. Mathematically, it gives rise to a nonlinear set of equations that comes down to solving an order 10 polynomial, which gives you up to 10 roots, and you're only interested in the real ones, and then you need to verify them and figure out which one's right. It's complicated. For this reason, we often use the 8-point algorithm, which uses 8 points, because this gives us a linear solution, and a linear problem is easy to solve in mathematics. So it looks like a solved problem. This is as good as we can do in the general case, and these results have been known for some time. The 8-point algorithm was published in 1981. It took about 20 years to get an efficient solution to the 5-point problem, but we've got the solutions. They work. Are we done? Well, probably not, otherwise I would have spoken about something else. The theory I presented talks about matching points between images and assumes that these are provided. Computing these matches, however, is quite difficult, and the features that we compute are not just points. They also have a size and an orientation. They have a location, of course, which is what we need in order to get the 5 or 8 points for the computation. The extra information is important when we get a computer to figure out which points match to one another, but generally gets thrown away when we get on to the 5 or 8-point algorithms. So the question I asked was, can we make use of this additional information in this process? And the answer, of course, is yes. But how does it work? If you look at these points, which are a bit hard to see there, so I'll highlight one of the bigger ones. You can see that the orientation has moved between the two views. Now, the orientation of the points within the images is kind of random and scattered and all over the place. But if you look at this change in orientation, it's very consistent. If we look at some more, then we see that the points are all changing by about the same amount. In this case, they're rotating by roughly 60 degrees. And if you look at the images, I've rolled the camera by about 60 degrees. This is not a coincidence. My insight was that the rotation of the camera around its view direction, its roll if you like, is very strongly correlated with the change in feature orientation. So much so, in fact, that you can remove one of these degrees of freedom from the problem. You can estimate the camera roll by plotting the change in feature orientation around a circle and looking for the really massive peak that shows up every time. So we need one fewer points to compute. So no prizes for guessing the algorithms that I invented. So more formally, we've removed a degree of freedom from our system of equations. Practically, we have the ability to form the 4 and 7-point algorithms for nonlinear and linear pose estimation from oriented features. Putting this on a formal footing involves a lot of mathematics, linear algebra, homogeneous systems of equations, quaternions, and so forth. But hopefully you get the basic idea of what I do in the technical work. This approach turns out to be faster and more reliable, and it uses information that people are computing anyway when they find the matches between two images. So I hope that's given you some idea about my technical area, but most of what I do is rather more applied and somewhat removed from these theoretical foundations, though obviously knowing about them helps me do all the things that I do. Computer vision involves understanding the world from images, and there's lots of situations in which we take in images. Mathematics gives us the tools to solve these puzzles and to address the epistemological engineering challenges that we face. But computer vision is applied in many different areas wherever we've got these pictures of the world, so the applications are many and varied. Recently, Holger, one of our colleagues, looked at the research within the School of Computing to see where we were strong. Some people were strong in human-computer interaction, some in artificial intelligence, some in software engineering, and so on. Holger put me in a category called all over the place. Here's why. I've worked with archaeologists to measure the size and shape of debitage produced in traditional Maori stone tool making. I've worked with artists. The picture here is from a work by David Green, which allows people to experience electromagnetic activity in the atmosphere being embodied as the Earth. I've worked with plant biologists, so I know more about the development of new cells in the apical meristem of Arabidopsis thaliana than any computer scientist has need to know. With colleagues in surveying, and within the School of Computing, I built an augmented reality sandbox and tested its use in education. I've worked with geologists to map the structure of fracture networks in rock cores. I've investigated AI techniques for handwriting recognition in historic documents from Hocken collections. I've collaborated on the analysis of medical imagery, which includes working with an actual brain surgeon on endoscopic imagery from surgery. I've contributed to research in robotics and viticulture for a vine pruning robot, and with zoologists, I've attempted to track the motion of some very fast-moving spiders. So this really does look like I'm all over the place. What's the common theme here? The common theme is the core question of computer vision. What can we know about the world from images? The epistemological engineering challenge. So you've heard a bit about how I got here and some more about what I do. In the last part of my talk, I'd like to reflect on why we do what we do. To start, I'd like us to reflect on what's a university. The place to start, of course, is where all essays start, with Wikipedia. A university, from the Latin universitas, a whole, is an institution of tertiary education and research which awards academic degrees in several academic disciplines. That seems pretty good, but it's a bit circular. What's a degree? It's a thing you got at university. What's a university? It's a thing that gives you a degree. What else is a university? Perhaps you think about the buildings, the campus. We've got quite a nice one here. Perhaps you think about the things the university does. Lectures, labs, research, graduations, inaugural professorial lectures. All good stuff, but for me, none of this really gets to the heart of what I think a university really is. A community of scholarship. That's what I think a university is, a community of scholarship. It's a short answer, but I think it really gets to the heart of what it is that we do here. Scholarship is what we do, asking questions and seeking answers, trying to understand the world around us, teaching, learning, research. And we don't do that alone. We do that as a community, a group of people bound together by a common cause, and our common cause is scholarship. This is the essence of our university. We need facilities and events to support our scholarship and to come together as a community, but they are not the university. The university is people coming together to learn about the world. Tonight, you've all come together to learn about my world. Tonight, here in this room, we are the university, or at least one part of it. Another requirement that was alluded to earlier in becoming a professor is leadership. Many of us in this room have leadership roles in the university. The widow that we must all take up is to keep at the forefront of our mind what a university is. If you agree with my answer, and we can, as a community of scholarship, discuss it, then it follows that as leaders we must support and foster our community in their pursuit of scholarship. This is our essence, our wairua. It is who we are and why we are here. It is the university. Some of you may know that it's been a rather eventful couple of years for computing at Otago. The departments of computer science and information science have merged to form the School of Computing, a change that was long overdue. This has led to a management of change, and we've seen many of our colleagues leave. We're also reducing the space we have for teaching and research. However, it's also given us the opportunity to make a proper combined computing curriculum. I've had a leadership role in this as the last head of computer science, and throughout the turmoil, I've been consistently impressed by my colleagues within the school and their dedication to the community of scholarship. At every turn, they have put the needs of students, both undergraduate and postgraduate, at the fore. Ngā mihi kia tātou. So I'm fortunate enough to be a member of this community of scholarship. More than that, I'm paid, directly or indirectly by the taxpayer no less, to do so. While the academic role is, within the academic role, we're given great freedom in how we do things, how we deliver our teaching, what we research, who we collaborate with. This is a great privilege, and so comes with responsibility. We should use this opportunity to make something better. This responsibility came to the front of my mind several years ago when I was at a conference listening to a keynote. The speaker was talking about the applications of facial recognition. There's a lot of applications of facial recognition, but the ones he talked about were things like identifying rich customers in banks so the manager can come out to them and they don't have to talk to staff. Tracking people through a queue in a burger joint to see how efficient the workers are. Identifying undesirables in shopping centres so security can escort them out. Real dystopian stuff. This guy was just presenting them as if they were technical challenges. He was happy to tell us that he was working on this, and the only mention of ethics was that there hadn't been any data breaches, so everything was fine, right? It came time for questions. Someone had to do it, so I did. I tried to be constructive, and I asked something around whether or not he thought that people's privacy had an inherent value regardless of the information security. We went back and forth for a while. I got angrier. I stopped. It became clear he didn't have any idea about the ethical issues. He didn't even truck out the old excuses. It's just a tool. Someone else will do it anyway. There's lots of other applications. None of that. He just had no idea. The rest of the conference, people just came up and thanked me for asking the question and having a go. But it got me thinking, why do I do what I do? You've seen that I've worked on lots of different problems. I hope they've all had some value. But again, I have this great privilege of being able to do what I choose. I should use it well. So in recent years, I've chosen to work on projects that have value to society, to culture, to our heritage. Stuff that's important to being people. Stuff that matters. The first project I'd like to talk about in this area is Aotea. This was supported by the Science for Technological Innovation National Science Challenge, which is quite long, so we call it SIFTI, and is a partnership with Te Runaka o Ararua and Te Rauaraha Marae and Bluff. The start of the project for me was a hui in Wellington. The SIFTI team wanted a project around the concept of digital marae. They wanted to talk about what that was. Holger put together something around virtual reality bringing people together over distance. And we went up to the hui in Wellington. It rapidly became clear to us that this work was going to be led by the community, not our academic interests or proposals. The hui discussed what technology might achieve for the communities and asked us, how can you help? This was new and put the value of the community at the heart of the project. At the end of the hui, one of the other researchers asked when they would find out if their project idea was going to be funded. He wasn't on the team. The team that eventually formed was led by Hemi Whanga, with the Aotea presence component at Otago led by Holger Regenbrecht. And I have to give a huge mihi to everyone involved, particularly to the Runaka and Bubba Thompson and Dean Whanga. The project was initially for 3 years. We spent 2 years on whakawhanaungatanga, getting to know each other. We visited the marae, nervous Pākehā entering Te Ao Māori. We worked and ate together in the wharenui and the wharekai. We slept in the wharenui. We made mistakes. We owned them and we learned from them. We became part of a new community and learned new ways of scholarship. The Aotea Presence work developed new technology to allow people to meet in virtual spaces. In particular, made 3D models of the wharenui, Tahu Potiki, which you can see here. This proceeded in several stages, and the model which you see here is a result of the work of many people over many years. The original reconstruction was based on photographs using the sort of technology that I talked about earlier, but there's been so much more done to it over the years. In the Aotea Presence system, people can enter the whare in virtual reality. They can see themselves and each other. They can talk to one another and play back 3D recordings of kaumātua telling the stories that are preserved in the tukutuku panels of the marae. There is a lot of technical effort that goes into creating reconstructions and experience such as these. But the value is not in the technology, it's in the application. What we're trying to achieve here is to connect people with their culture and heritage, to their marae and tūranga waiwai. There is a deeper value here that we are trying to reproduce, a genuine cultural experience. So did we succeed? What you see here and the rest of the software that the RTO project team has produced is technically impressive, the work of a large team, and I'm a very small part of that team. But the real value is evident in the response of the community. We've had people concerned that their virtual selves are wearing shoes in the virtual whare. This is a breach of tikanga in the real world, and the fact that it carries across gives us evidence that this is giving them a genuine cultural experience. We've had people greet the recordings of Dean and Bubba by name, not seeing them as a video or a recording, but as someone there with them to interact with. We've had people cry when they've met relatives from cities where they haven't visited for a long time in the virtual whare. We've given people a genuine connection to their marae from a distance. We've made something better. Other work that I'm involved with has a more technical focus. With archaeologists at the university and Te Hura Otago Museum, I'm investigating applications of 3D reconstruction in various ways. The example you see here is a 3D scan of a flake produced during the manufacture of a stone tool, such as a toki. These flakes have a great variety in shape. They can be big or small, wide or narrow, and so forth. I will now demonstrate the entirety of my archaeological knowledge because it's limited to this very narrow field. They do have common characteristics. They have a flat surface, the striking platform that you can see at the top. This is where the stone was struck to remove the flake. The stone is struck sharply so that a shock wave goes through the rock, causing the flake to come away cleanly. This creates a smooth surface on the side of the flake that was closest to the tool. It has a characteristic curve to it called the bulb of percussion. The other side of the flake is rough, where various other flakes have been removed and left scars. Looking at a single flake tells us something about how the tools were made, but the challenge is to combine information from many flakes. Making a single tool creates dozens of these flakes, and the main sites where tools were made historically have piles of them. Recording them by hand is impractical, so can we get a computer to do the analysis I just described? There are many other applications of technology in archaeology and related areas. For example, digital twins of museum collections can provide broader access to artifacts and support the repatriation of taonga to communities. This work, however, is not just an application of the tools to a new area. New tasks raise new challenges and so drive us to improve the technology, to improve the theoretical underpinnings of computer vision methods. In this case, the stone flakes that you see have a very large overall variation in size compared to the details that we're interested in. So we need finer grained analysis to detect their common features, which is what we're exploring in the work supported by the Marsden Fund. This work, like almost all of my research, is a collaboration. And I'd like to acknowledge Richard and Karen from archaeology, Gerard and Lana from Te Hura, Lek, Namal, Jinyu, and Charlie in the School of Computing. The final project that I want to talk about is Haurongo. This is an exhibition that was hosted by Te Hura Otago Museum last year. The exhibition showcased Moriori culture in the wild landscape of Rikohu, Chatham Islands. I know many people here were able to visit the exhibition, and we still hope to have it tour with the support of the community. There are a lot of misconceptions about Moriori, and their history has been, at times, a very dark and traumatic one. The goal of the exhibition was to portray them as they are, a living culture undergoing revitalization. As Hayden put it, we can't change history, but we can start shaping the future. For the Aotea project, I said that we spent the first 2 years in whakawhanaungatanga, relationship building. For Haurongo, we just had 2 years. In that time, we had to earn the trust of the community and form productive relationships. This was done by following a co-design of the exhibits. Co-design is a process where there is constant communication between stakeholders and designers. Here, the designers are the researcher team at Otago, the stakeholders of the Moriori community. To help with this, we use two simple but effective tools, the flowchart and the Venn diagram. They may seem simple, even flippant, but these really are the heart of the co-design process. Along the way, we had to consult with the community repeatedly and at every stage. What was the story that they were trying to tell? Did we have it correct? Were we portraying the culture correctly? What is the message we're trying to get across? All the big questions needed the community to answer them. The Venn diagram encapsulates our challenge. There are things the community wants, things that we could provide as the university, and things that the museum would let us do. Our job was to get as much of the blue circle into the little middle bit as we could, to achieve as much as we could for the community, given the constraints we had. The exhibition involved a team with a huge range of talents, the community, filmmakers, curators, designers, technologists, musicians. My part was to oversee the technology used in the exhibition. It was planned from the start to be interactive, where people could touch and feel, see and hear, smell and taste. Well, not taste, no food in the galleries. The only object behind glass was a preferred rako momori, a kopi tree trunk carved with an ancestor figure to stand as guardian over the exhibition. On the left here, we see a drawing interactive where people can colour in birds, they go and fly in the forest. This exhibition was very popular with over 6,000 birds drawn in the 6-week run. On average, that's one every 3 minutes. There were some very quiet times. We also saw emergent behaviour. One day we came in and all the birds were rainbows. Another day, they were all Palestinian flags. People used this as a tool to express what was going on in their lives. On the right is a view of a virtual rako momori. As I said, we had a preserved trunk behind glass, but we wanted to get people close to this. This is an example of the Venn diagram in action. We had originally planned to have an immersive virtual experience where you put on a headset. In consultation with the community, this was felt to be too isolating because people in the virtual world aren't really aware of what else is going on around them. The technology we used here is somewhat simpler in many ways, but allows people to share the experience. And that was what the community wanted people to have in the gallery. And of course, it was the right choice. One of the clearest examples of co-design is the Changing of the Winds exhibit. This interaction is based on the traditional of giving karaki to the echu to bring favourable winds. A translation of karaki to the echu could be prayers to the gods, but that's not right. A more accurate one would be invocations to the elements. The story we heard was that Moriori would strike rako with wooden sticks or wands as part of the karaki. It wasn't clear what the provenance of this exhibition, of this story was. So Deb and others in the community did some research. There is physical evidence of this tradition, rako with worn areas where the trunk has been struck in cardinal directions. And we built this exhibition around it. When you strike the trunk, the karaki plays, and as you continue to strike it, you can change the wind from north to south or south to north. The south wind is characterized as strong and male and cold, the north wind as gentle and female and warm. The karaki was provided by Deb, and the exhibition was aligned north-south in the exhibition to give it some relevance. Discovering the details of this tradition, embodying it in an interactive exhibit, took a lot of cycles of prototyping and consultation, co-design at its heart. This was a huge project that involved literally dozens of people. Deborah Goomes was our key cultural advisor. HMT and the community were central to the whole project. The academic team was led by Gianna Savoy, with Nancy Longnecker, Jean Catamol and I having leadership roles in various areas. Craig Scott and his team worked wonders bringing our ideas to life in the exhibition itself. So as you've seen, my journey here has never been a lonely one. I've depended on the support of a multitude of people and organisations. Thanks are always risky because it's easy to leave someone out, but I need to take that risk. I'd like to thank the organisations that supported me with research funding, in particular the Science for Technological Innovation National Science Challenge, the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment through the Endeavour Fund, the Royal Society Te Aparangi through the Marsden Fund Te Pūtea Rangahau and Marsden, and the University of Otago Whakaihu Waka. Perhaps most importantly, I'd like to thank the various communities that have so generously welcomed me into spaces that would normally be out of reach for a middle-aged white guy. To highlight just a few, Te Rūnaka o Aotearoa and the community at Te Rauaraha Marae and Bluff, the Hokitehi Moriori Trust and the Moriori community on Rekahu and the mainland, Te Hura Otago Museum. I have been welcomed onto Marae, supported community events, listened as tauhunga discussed the foundations of Mataranga Māori, heard Maheki Oro played on Rekahu for the first time in centuries. I have worked and laughed and cried with you, and I am deeply grateful. Thank you, ngā mihi, me rongo. I'd like to thank all of my collaborators and co-authors on the myriad projects I've been involved with over the years. The faces you see on the screen are those who I've co-authored papers with, or at least those I could find a picture of. One person is missing. They are here tonight. They know what they've done. I'd like to thank again all of my family and friends for their love and support over the years, particularly my parents and my dearest Amanda. I'd like to give particular acknowledgement to those who are no longer with us, to my grandparents, to my PhD supervisor Kevin Novins, to Bubba Thompson, and to everyone else who supported me along the way and has passed on. And finally, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you all for coming along to support me and listen to my IPL. I hope you have learned something, I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'm fortunate to have you in my life. And if you want something to take away tonight, I offer you this. Why we do what we do matters, and we can make something better. Thank you. That's it, Stan.
Well done, well done. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Grant Dick tōku ingoa. I'm the head of the School of Computing, for those of you who don't know me. First and foremost, thank you all for coming here tonight, and also those online to celebrate Professor Mills' IPL. I also thank Steve for what was an entertaining and enlightening talk. There was a risk that it couldn't have been, but you absolutely sold it, so well done. Congratulations. It's my task now to wrap things up, and I will wrap things up as quick as I can, which, if you know me, sometimes drags on a little bit, so I will bring it down. With a few comments about Steve and his role in the computing family, both here at Otago and broader. Steve's presentation today has clearly showcased a wide range of engagement with computing, well beyond the straight and narrow of your typical teach your papers, find a research theme, and do some service. I think part of that, and you've seen it tonight, is down to Steve's inquisitive character, but also because the university runs fairly deep in his veins. And I'll use an example of where this comes from. I'm reminded in a Senate meeting approximately 2 years ago to the day, where the case was being made to establish the School of Computing. And Steve and I were there to make our arguments as to why it was a good idea. Steve pointed out that many key points in his life were connected with the computer science community and the wider university, and you heard about them today, things like his undergraduate, meeting his future true love, postgraduate, and then ultimately employment here as an academic. It was quite compelling as a demonstration of what was being proposed and how it was a significant change to both Steve's spiritual impact and also an impact on his own identity in some ways, and that we were fundamentally changing things. And his courage going forward with that, I thought, was quite compelling. So thank you very much. He clearly has a lot of skin in the game at Otago Whakaihuwaka. And anyone who's sat in a committee meeting or working group or IPL with Steve will know that he has a lot of insightful, passionate, and principled views on how this place should operate. His fingerprints are all over the university, be it in the wider research collaborations within the school, the wider university, and outside into the wider community. It might be with the many PhD students that he's guided, the unicorns and rainbows, his words, of curriculum development, leadership and bravery in committing to tearing down departments and establishing a new school. And generally just being a pretty good citizen around the university. You would think that this would signal it's time for a rest, but actually it's quite hard to keep Steve out of any proceedings. There's no end to the willingness that he'll participate and contribute. On several occasions over the last few months, Steve suggested that maybe it's time to step back a little and focus a little bit more on his research. 2 minutes later, within the same conversation, something on my to-do list will come up, and the words, "Do you need a hand with that?" will promptly fall out of Steve's mouth. So you're your own punishment, mate. There's been more rows to hoe than you could possibly imagine over the last couple of years, and I thank Steve personally for the mahi and keeping me sane and helping me navigate as we form the school. I also thank you on behalf of all of your colleagues in the school who have greatly valued your steer and stewardship on this. It certainly hasn't been a lone effort in getting this all done, and we truly value your contributions over the last couple of years in particular. Okay, we all want to get to the staff club, so I'll finish with this. Steve has managed to do something that many of us aspire to, particularly in computing, but fail to achieve regularly, and that's to have actual meaningful impact in their research. We claim it, but to many of us, computer vision, and I'll put my hand up here, is largely a soulless collection of algorithms, linear algebra, and something called RANSAC I heard about just before. Certainly an intersection between computer vision and Te Ao Māori, for example, is not immediately obvious. But Steve's ability to identify this intersection and use it for the betterment of our people and places is one that I personally envy. It shows mastery of his field, and the passion that he has for this to use it for good inspires many around him to do better with the research that they do. So without doubt, Steve's quite a handy person to have around. Don't go anywhere. And I look forward to seeing how this and his vision of computing leads us to generally do better. As a small token of our appreciation, I now present the traditional gift, and I ask you once again to congratulate Professor Steve Mills. Kia ora.